Okay, excellent. Okay, trust you're all going well and enjoying life and having a wonderful time, even despite all the craziness that's going on in the world. No doubt that there's many good things, and this is good that you're all coming along here and taking some action to work on protecting your wealth and really making sure that you learn from what's happening and can take some serious steps moving forward. Okay, so let's get underway without any further ado. So, as I mentioned, I'm not a licensed lawyer, accountant, financial planner. Hi, Katie. I'm not a licensed, I'm equally not a licensed doctor, although that shouldn't really stop me giving medical advice based on Bill Gates' success in being the most powerful doctor in Google. But anyway, maybe I could call myself the most powerful lawyer in the world, even though I'm not registered. Anyway, I'll probably leave that one out for now. Don't give up your power to anyone for that matter. Nothing I say takes into account your personal situation. This is educational advice only. If you don't feel sufficiently empowered to deal with a situation, seek professional legal advice. It's funny, really. I probably get, at the moment, on average, every 2 days, a request for legal advice. And we always have to write back the same answer. Warren's not a lawyer. And I probably had 2 of them in the last 3 days. And so, yeah, anyway, hopefully you've all read that disclaimer. It goes for about 60 minutes. Please get rid of all distractions and turn mobiles and social media to silent. Now, please type comments in the text chat and questions in the Q&A section. So it makes it easier. Like when we get inundated with questions in the chat, we lose them, just the way the Zoom chat works. So, and it also is easier. If you put it in the question and answer, we make an attempt to answer every question in the Q&A. Comments, I won't give you that guarantee, okay? So if you want to comment, put your question to comment, you're welcome to, but it probably won't get answered. So, but by all means, put your comments, when I'm asking for feedback, put it in the comments. Okay, recording will be available and things like that. So as many of you know, this is my background. I've been doing this a long time. And so what I'll be teaching today is not just what I know from my time in doing this, but actually street smart stuff and stuff that I've been involved with in insolvency, people about to go broke. So it's not just a theoretical thing. I've helped people who are at serious risk of losing money, being chased for a house. And this strategy is an absolute gem for so many reasons. So these are to say some refreshers of what we're saying. And look, all this kind of stuff doesn't bode well for the financial and asset market. I'm telling you, this will spill over into the financial realm, okay? If they're going to start getting away with putting needles into people and coercing them into them, you can only imagine what they got planned for the financial section in Australia and parts of the world. And I am expecting some fairly major asset grabs, and not just the high net worth I speak to, but as I mentioned, for those of you who read the Sovereign Individual book written by Rees-Mogg and Davidson, they predicted major asset grabs and government stealing money without any kind of attempt to hide it. So there's no attempt to hide right now the absurdity of the mandates for doing on this needle stuff. And it'll be the same with that. They'll just take people's money. They'll say, we've got to take it because we've got to prop up our debts and, we've got to keep the system alive and we've got to fix up all those other people who've got no money. And I said in the last webinar, it's how I explained to my kids about taxes. I said, let's say 2 of you work your asses off and are making, millions, and 2 of you sit in your ass all day and play games. And I come to the 2 of you who are actually working your ass off and say, hey guys, I'm taking 40% of your money. And they're like, why? And I'll say, well, a little bit for expenses, like maybe say 10% for expenses. I go, well, we're fine with that. What about the other 30%? Oh, no, we're giving that to your brothers. It's not fair that your brothers should have no money when you guys are making all this money. And they're like, well, but hang on a sec. We're doing all the work. And I'm like, well, yeah, but that's, your brothers have got, one of them's got mental health issues, another one's just going through a hard time and he's just not ready to get a job. And it's like, well, it's not my problem. That's what I said, that's kind of the system we're dealing with. And they're like, that's terrible. And I was like, yeah. So my kids are pretty awakened from young because they just got that straight away, that metaphor. And so doctors and businesses are just being sensed and forced into compliance. We're seeing provisional medical procedures being coerced. all in the guise of safety. And as I mentioned, like when people say to me, I get regularly, another email I get all the time is, oh, New South Wales are changing all the property titles to electronic. What does this mean? Does this mean they're taking our properties? Well, number one, it's probably more than anything just a, same as it done in WA, a digital system to just make it more efficient. But number two, they've taken everyone's property a long time ago. The moment we became a feudal system, you'd have known it anyway, because you don't have what's called a allodial title. You have a freehold title. And I said, and in any event, some time ago, from what I understand, every state in Australia, all their property titles were transferred to an offshore corporation that no one knows who owns it. I know Queensland and WA is certainly the case, and I'm pretty sure the other states are the same. So basically, in saying all that, in reality is if you've got your properties very well protected, although you can't stop if the feudal king decides to take everyone's houses off them, I'm not sure that's necessarily going to happen in Australia. I mean, nothing's impossible, but at the very least, what a second mortgage does is it gives you a very powerful remedy, as you'll learn today, to protect you against lawsuits, against governments trying to take your money, and giving you the right to be able to move money offshore if they force a property away from you. And there's a lot, if you understand the power of mortgages and these things and what they do. And it's a very powerful strategy in the reset. And although nothing is completely foolproof, it's as close to foolproof as you'll ever get. And it works like a treat in regards to, let's say the tax office chasing you for a tax debt, they want to sue you and bankrupt you and then get the money from your house or whatever else. I had a situation years ago where I protected the family home that Grace lives in, and it saved us. I went broke in the business, and the landlord, from a lease guarantee, which, was a huge amount of money, which I couldn't pay at the time, he was going to go for my house. And he pretty much said it. And he was beside himself with rage when he found out it was all protected. And he even called me to his office and tried to strong arm me, intimidate me, scare the crap out of me. And I hate to say, he did a reasonably good job. One of the few people I've met in my life who really scared me. He had a lot of power and personal presence. I held my ground with him, but I was scared. And that in the end, he kind of considered laughing, but he couldn't do anything about it. And still to this day, it basically saved the house. So I know how this works in my own life as well as with clients. So as I mentioned about that, there's no question about this coming up. So this is a strategy you really do wish to be doing. And I'd really trust that those of you who've got properties sitting in your individual name with a lot of equity are going to take some real action after what you hear tonight. And at the very least, come along to our event on the 23rd of October, where we're going to be doing a whole one-day event on protecting your wealth from the Great Reset. We're going to be covering this topic among many others. And, at the very least, you'll do that. But also, after you've been to that event, or even before that, you will start taking action to protect your assets and do that. So becoming truly sovereign. And as I mentioned, a sovereign individual, full right to govern himself. I mean, what I really like about dealing with high net worth clients, for example, is most of them, they're very empowered and educated in this area, and they don't just blindly trust their accountant. I don't have an accountant trying to sabotage me. That's what I really like about it as well. And so that's why being empowered means your accountants, your lawyers, your health practitioners are just servants who've got knowledge, and that's all they are. Like when I'm working with a client, that's what I'm there to do. I'm there to give some guidance, give my advice, give my suggestions, and then ultimately it's for the client to decide what they wish to do with that advice. So elite know how to protect their wealth. They don't trust governments as far as they can throw them. And they know they're just a bunch of big organised thugs who basically want to take your money off you as much as they can. And they're just trying to dress it up to look like they're being nice and it's, wasn't their fault. So it's what you don't know that gets you in the trouble, and why I emphasize most people will lose their money in the reset. So the high net worth and know that keeping wealth is just as important as making it. And that's why second mortgages. Now, second mortgages can be a misnomer, because if you own your property outright, for example, you got a first mortgage on the property. So it's kind of really important to, get a little bit of a head about, what a second mortgage actually is, how it works in the real world, and things like that. So Yeah, so basically, let's have a bit of a look at what I mean by second mortgages and things like that. Sorry, my mouse is really playing up at the moment. Just give me a sec.
2,000 years later.
So, summary of what I was saying and what I've been saying so far to date is owning things in a structure where it's possible. So these are a summary of what I've taught in many previous webinars of asset protection. Sort of, a lot of stuff summarized very simply. So owning things in a structure where possible, have separate structure, if in your own name, use the straw man and person of substance strategy, which basically means in simple English, own nothing, control everything, and only have an asset in your own name if you've already set it up that way and it will cost you a lot in tax to change that, or there are negative gearing considerations and you combine it with these things called second mortgages. So that's another reason why you might have property sitting in your own name. General rule is you should not own assets in your own name. You shouldn't own shares in your own name. Cash, gold, silver, cryptos, you're crazy. The one only asset which occasionally can make sense is a property. And the situation where a property would be owned in your own name is where, like I said, you've already set it up that way and it'll cost a lot in tax to change it, or negative gearing considerations, and you combine it with second mortgages. That's another reason. A third reason as well is what's called a family home, because you can jeopardize your capital gains tax exemption if it's in your own name. In saying that, there is a way around it, but that's generally why. So the simple thing I'm saying here today, the general rule is you want to own every asset, including properties in a trust, but sometimes it makes sense to have a property in your own name. Because if it's in your own name, like say Warren owns a house, then if I've been trying to transfer my $10 million property, for example, if I had one, into a trust, it would cost me about $600,000 in stamp duty. If the property was an investment property and it had doubled in value, I'd be up for about $2 million in tax and stamp duty. So it just wouldn't do it. If your property's worth about $1 million, you'll be up for 50 grand stamp duty, for example, and things like that. So they're negative gearing considerations, combine it, family home, things like that. So now, using separate entities, it's all well and good if you're starting out, as I said, but what if you've already set up in your own name and you own properties in your own name? Now, my guess is that a lot of you here who own properties in your own name, like my guess is most of you, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So, and the reasons you would have done it is many. Some would have just done it because they didn't know any better. Some would have done it because it was easier at the time. Some of you were just never taught this. Some of you know a little bit about this, but you just didn't see the point because it was a family home. And it can be, or some of you because you were making large incomes and you wanted to negative gear, and your accountant said to you, hey, if you buy it in a trust, you will not be able to claim your negative gearing in your own name, which is correct. So unless you've actually got another trust, which is earning business income and things like that. So what can you do to protect your assets? There's 3 ways to do it. And although I'm mainly going to be talking about mortgages, I'm just going to, for the sake of completeness, mention the 2 others. So one is you just transfer the asset, like you transfer the property into a trust. So you've got your $1 million house and you go, hey, I'll just transfer it into a trust. So it's the main problem with this is it can trigger tax issues. Like, for example, New South Wales stamp duty is really high. Not just that, New South Wales are real buggers with land tax in that they charge you a lot extra in land tax if you have your money. They charge you a lot. They charge you, I think, 2% land tax extra or some high amount. I can't remember the exact amount if you have a property in New South Wales in a trust. So this scares off many people from doing it as well. So sometimes in New South Wales, when I've been guiding clients, we end up concluding that we're going to have to buy it in the own name, but we use the mortgage strategy. So, and CGT as well. So this is why you've always got to get professional advice for your situation before doing anything like this, because whether you should transfer to a trust or you own it in a trust or buy your new house in a trust or structure or anything like that, yeah, it's just, as I mentioned, it's a really big thing. So the other problem too is, let's say you transfer the property into a trust, you got this thing called a bankruptcy clawback rule, where under the bankruptcy laws, they can claw back the property anytime within 5 years if someone actually, sues and tries to undo the second mortgage. It's 2 years if you do a market value transaction. So let's just say the trust actually bought the property. That's only 2 years. But the bankruptcy clawback rules are a real bugger. Now, in saying that, this doesn't concern me as much because in practice, 99% of properties or lawsuits get turned off the moment they see you got a mortgage or they see you've done transferred to a trust. So generally in the real world is that if you've done this, there's and the government wants to chase you for a lot of money, for example, because you've fallen behind your taxes or someone else is after you. Once they go to be lawyers and they try to liquidate you or make you insolvent, and they discover that your property's in a trust or whatever and got moved a year ago, the lawyer would say, yeah, we could probably undo it in the bankruptcy clawback, but it's going to take it's going to cost you about $100,000 because you're going to take a Supreme Court and argue all that. And then they just go, oh, don't bother. That's what would happen. That frequently is what happens. So that's not a big reason, but it is in practical terms, but legally it's an issue. So as an example, like Peter and Kelly own an investment property. They owe some money to Westpac. They got some equity at risk. They decided to set up a family trust and they transferred in there, but they're going to be up for stamp duty and capital gains tax because it's an investment property. And if they buy in New South Wales, they're going to probably have some greater land tax to deal with as well. So as you can see, to give you a bit of an idea, it's going to cost them a lot to do that because it's going to be 40 to 50K in stamp duty to transfer $1 million. They're going to have some capital gains tax as well. And let's just say that they sold for 1 million and they'd made a capital gain of 200,000. And that's going to be common with property prices going completely and utterly stark raving mad in Australia, and it'll probably be more than that. So it'd probably be a lot more than that. So I'm being conservative here. They'd probably, if they lived in New South Wales and had been caught in the property boom, they probably would be up for a couple of $100,000. So it's just not, it's obviously would not be a wise thing for them to do. That's a very expensive insurance policy. And they'll probably just go, yeah, what's the point? And I've actually heard asset protection people just say people do it and just wear the cost and do it. And I'm just like, why would you do that? Because when you learn about the second, what they do, they take what I call a COVID approach. It's like with COVID, they're smashing needles into everyone and shutting the world down for a virus with like 1 in 1,000 likelihood to kill you or whatever it is and things like that. And likewise, although yes, in the real world, if you transfer it in there, it can be a teeny bit more protected. I mean, it's literally what I call, it's like a COVID situation. It's the best way to think about it. So it's safe to say that total cost would be a lot. So another option is that, and this is like, there's a few spruikers out there promoting this, like go put a caveat on it from your trust. So a caveat, what that is in property law is a caveat basically is like a good example of that is, let's just say that I want to go and I'm entering into a property interest over for a 2-year purchase of a property. So we got like a vendor finance deal where the person's going to gradually sell it to me over 2 years, and we enter an agreement. I might then take out a caveat on the property, and what the caveat does, it says that they can't sell the property without the property titles people notifying me and giving me 14 days notice that they're trying to sell it. So then I will know that they're trying to be sneaky buggers and sell it over my head. So caveats are really good things in situations like for developers. Developers will do that, like they might buy land and take a caveat. Like let's say they've got a purchase contract with someone, a deal to develop on their land. The first thing they'll do is take out a caveat to make sure that the person doesn't then sneakily go and sell it over their head. So caveats work really well. Caveats, I don't think work as well with asset protection because they can write 14 days notice to give a good reason for it. Unless you've got a really good reason for it, they'll just hit the caveat anyway. So I don't really see the point of it for that reason myself. In any event, mortgages are just a better way of going about it, even if caveats do work well. And I can't think of a single lawyer who I trust and think is really good who doesn't basically agree with me on this one. So That's why just about all of them say this is by far the best way to go on a property to protect it. The other reason I'll just quickly say the caveat, it's easier to do. Like a caveat's cheap. You could just wander down, write one up and plonk it on the property at land titles yourself. And again, most people like the easy option. They go, yep, let's just do the cheap thing. And as I mentioned in my last webinar, most people prefer to do things that don't require too much brain thinking on their part and stuff that's hard work. Like they're not good at admin, so they won't do it and their finances are a mess. That's a classic example. Or they're not good at understanding offshore or detailed paperwork, so they don't do it. I don't like paperwork, which might surprise people having been a former lawyer and accountant and still doing all that, but I hate paperwork. I actually do. That's why I did everything in my power when I became an accountant and lawyer to avoid being involved in document creation where I could. I avoided tax returns like the plague. I got into creative tax planning really quickly. As a lawyer, although I did wills and that, I bought a precedent off another law firm, actually paid them for it. And I knew they were the best law firm in Australia on asset protection. They estate planning. I just bought their precedents and used them. And because I knew they worked and they'd been proven. So then that made it easy. It was all set up for me. It was just a very simple admin task. I did it myself initially, but then trained up an assistant to do the paperwork for me. So I don't like paperwork, but I knew I had to do it. And I just trained up someone in my company who I knew was better at it than me. So that's my comment. Doing a mortgage is a bit of work to get it done, but it's a really good thing to do for your property. So the best way to think of a mortgage is that there is a very good reason why banks take a mortgage for security, okay? So banks will basically do this, and I'll kind of type this on this one. But the reason that banks want security of a mortgage is because a mortgage basically, gives basically first right of proceeds of the property when sold. That's what it basically gives. So it gives first right of proceeds of the property when sold before going back to the owner. That's how it works. So mortgages are an ancient way to give security to make absolutely sure that the banks, otherwise, why would the bank lend you $1 million, for example, to buy a house? Because they will just, and if they lent it to you, then you might just go and sell it and then default on the loan because you've got financial problems. So you sell your house and you quickly spend the money on something else and then give the bank only some of the money. So that's why banks do that. They take a mortgage, they take what's called a first mortgage. So what this does is, let's say Westpac do it. The bank gets what I call first priority over the proceeds, over anyone else. A second mortgage this is where the holder gets secondary priority after the first, mortgage holder gets paid, okay? That's the best way to think about it. So in simple terms, let's just say you've got Westpac Bank who've got a first mortgage over a property, okay? So Westpac Bank have got a first mortgage over the property. And let's say that the property's worth $1 million, Westpac have got a 600,000. In fact, let's just make it really easy for you and use this here. So I'll just do a bit of an example. Let's say Jack and Jill have a property worth, $1 million in joint names. So let's just say CBA has, first mortgage of, let's say 600,000. And let's say you borrowed from someone else, or let's just say your trust has got second mortgage of 300,000. So let's just say, if house sells, let's say for $1 million, CBA gets paid first, then your trust. And as you can imagine, so let's just say that someone's trying to sue you, or the ATO claims you owe them $200,000. So they go, okay, oh, good, Jack and Jill got a house, we're going to get these buggers. Then they find out there's a first and second mortgage on it. I can tell you what happens in the real world because I've actually been involved in this discussion with liquidators and solvency when I used to be a lawyer. The ATO goes to liquidator. Oh, look, don't bother. Just, get something out of them and leave it at that. So the liquidator will come to you and say, oh, look, you owe the ATO 200,000. Can you at least offer 10 grand? You go, yep, you'll offer 10 grand and that'll be it. Liquidator will take the money, take half of it for himself, give the ATO 5 grand and they move on. That's actually what happens. And the reason why is the ATO knows that this is just a bugger. So yes, they could engage a top lawyer, give the liquidator $100,000 and say, you know what, go and look into this one and take this on, find out if we could attack this second mortgage. But in the real world, it doesn't actually happen. So basically, they just go, whatever. Let's say by contrast that there was no mortgage on the property and Jack and Jill owned the property worth $1 million with no debt. Could you imagine the joy in the ATO's heart? Or imagine the joy. So you've got the ATO wanting to go after them because let's say Jack and Jill have got a business with some problems. The ATO wants 300,000 and is also, Bob trying to get 400 grand out of them. If Bob came to me in the days of the lawyer, Bob would be rubbing his hands with joy. I'd say, yep, Bob, you got an open slatter here, mate. This is a easy take. So Bob would probably just sue you for the heck of it. And I've known people who've done it. I personally got sued and they admitted to me they just sued me even though they knew there was no merit, so hoping that my insurer would give them some money. So that happened to me like about 15 years ago. So people do this shit, and they would just try it on. So if you've got property sitting there, a large amount with high equity, you are a joy, absolute joy. Like the ATO would rub their hands with great happiness. The people who you owe money to, who want to go after you, who want to make your life misery, they'll rub their hands with great happiness. They'll dance and they'll have a celebration, and they'll be ready to go after you. And so most people don't know how the game works and they sit there procrastinating and don't realize that they're a sitting duck, absolute sitting duck, like easiest lawsuit on planet Earth. And I can remember having a liquidator invite me into his office and telling me off the record, he goes, look, these clients you're bringing me, you've got to make sure they've got a mortgage on their property. This one particular one, he said, before you bring them to me, because, mate, if the ATO see this, they're going to say, push this guy and get money out of him. He's got a property, make him sell his house or get a line of credit over his property. If they see a mortgage on the property, they just won't be bothered because they know most people are idiots and they won't do it. And I say that a bit facetiously. I'm not saying that you're an idiot if you haven't done it because you haven't been educated. I'm doing that to kind of shock you and get that and get the idea, if you know what I mean. So the ATO, that's how the game works in the real world by and large. So who's a little bit in shock or a little bit like, wow, I didn't know this kind of stuff, just out of curiosity? Who's like, whoa, man. Just type in the chat. Anyone? Or is it only me? Oh, good. There's a few. Linda, Henry, Nadine. Yeah. Most of you probably go like, holy moly, So Rob News, absolutely, yeah. Jake, wish I knew this 15 years ago. Yeah, look, most people, yeah. As you can see, you can imagine how the government been trying to take your property off you for any reason. If they see the mortgage on it, they got to pay that mortgage out. So, e.g., Jack and Jill, as I mentioned that. So another example. Jack and Jill owe 100 grand to the CBA who have a first mortgage over the property, $900,000 at risk, and equity at risk as Jack runs a medical practice. So obviously Jack's at high risk. I mean, if you're a doctor, you are a walking joy for anyone who wants to find a money to sue. So what Jack and Jill can do is set up a Jack and Jill trust with a corporate trustee for a series of transactions. Now, if you ask, how do you do these transactions? I'll show you at the end. It's difficult to explain how to do it. It would literally do your head in, and I don't have time to explain it today. I'll reference you to an article we produced where you can read it more to see it for yourself. What I'll do for now is I'll just temporarily going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm just going to share a different screen. So I'm going to share my whiteboard instead. and you're going to get to see my wonderful artistic skills or lack of them. But anyway, so you got this family trust, which we set up over here. That's the house. Not quite what I was hoping to draw, but I got there. That's Jack. As you can see, he shaved his head. And you've got Jill, who's grown her hair really long. And you've got she's got some hair extensions as well, I think. So we'll just give them some hair extensions. So these are the owners of the ones over here. So what you've done is they're going to set up this thing, this family trust. And so let's just say the house over here, you've got, just put this here. So, okay, so 100K, hang on. So mortgage, I forgot one important group here. So you got the other one I forgot to mention here. You got the bank. So let's say CBA bank. Over here, so CBA have got this mortgage. $100K mortgage over the property. So now what we're going to do is through a series of transactions, we're going to create a let's say 800K mortgage. Let's say they jointly own the property. So if either of them gets into trouble, they're fucked. So owners. So as you can see, if it just got the CBA with a mortgage over it, they're an absolute sitting duck, like total duck, you know, of the highest order. So it'd be very, very easy to just want to have that whiteboard to say, take that, basically hit these guys pretty hard, as you can see. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense to everyone, and you can see why. So anyone suing Jack and Jill or the ATO, they'll just see that and they'll see that, and they'll know that these guys are really hard work, you know, like really like not worth the effort, and they'll just go, yeah, you know, no point. So hopefully that makes a modicum of sense to people, and you can actually understand what that's all about. So yeah, as I mentioned here, they take a series of transaction. So they have this, you know, things like that. And the net result is going to be quite beautiful for Jack and Jill, in that they're going to actually not really end up owning much of this property at all. So by creating this second mortgage, this is going to be the result, and there's only going to be 100K equity. So like I said, I'm noticing questions coming in the chat. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I will not be answering questions in the chat. I'll only be answering questions that are actually put in the Q&A. It's just too difficult to hunt down and find them. So I can do them in a basically orderly manner. So what I strongly recommend for those of you who've done it, just, you know, cut and go and copy your question, and then go ahead and put that in the, like I said, in the Q&A. Otherwise, it will get missed. So basically, that's it. So Jack is a doctor and a high risk and things like that. So securing it with a mortgage, how would we do it? In basic terms, as I mentioned here, second is if they have cash or access to cash, like an offset account, this is the best way. So what I'm saying in simple terms here is that in an ideal world, you've got some cash to move around to do this, because then the mortgage is legitimate. If anyone challenges it, it's very hard to undo. If you just do it all on paper, it's still pretty effective, because in 98 to 99% of the cases, as soon as the government or anyone sees a mortgage, they won't be bothered. If you've just done an equity transfer on paper, generally it can be unwound very easy anytime in the next 5 years without any problem. So but in saying that, in the real world, if you don't have cash, it's better to have one there, even if it's a little bit kind of, there's no real basis for it, than not having one at all. So that's the basic rule with doing that, so to speak. So what happens if the property value increases is what I'm saying. Assuming property goes up to 1.5 million, now Jack and Jill, it's all changed now. They're going, oh shit, they've now got 600K exposed. So in this situation, they need to increase the second mortgage, a bit like getting a booster shot. Not that you want to get a booster shot. Jack is a business owner and things like that. So what they would do to increase the second mortgage is they can up-stamp it. Like what they can even do is just go ahead, do another $500,000 transfer or whatever, and make sure there's some kind of basis for it. Like the money moves around, it ends up in a trust, and they use it for investment purposes. So really what you're doing is you're kind of like your own bank. Now, what I would say as well to people is that if you're kind of really keen to read more about it, although the Global Wealth Club's the company, of course, that I mainly run to educate, there's another company I'm involved in to set up structures for people and do this stuff, which is called WealthSafe. There's actually a really cool article here, Asset Protection, Second Mortgages. You just click on that one there, and it just explains a little bit more if you want to go ahead and read more. So that's just a little bit of a aside if you really want to do that, and things like that. So another good example here, Jack is a business owner. His company owns $1 million in GST and pays you go to the ATO. So this is a common situation. So Jack's basically, because of COVID lockdowns, is really kind of going, oh shit, he's had no income coming in. He hasn't paid the tax office from his BASs. He's been using the money to pay his staff and look after his child support and help out, look after his secret lover and everything else that he's doing. So he doesn't really have much assets. And generally people tend to do this. They stop paying the tax office and just starts paying everything else. The issue for Jack, however, is Jack, say he comes for some advice, and Jack's got a property worth $750K in his own name with only $100K mortgage to Westpac. Now, as soon as the ATO see that, because pay-as-you-go, although GST in a company can't be recovered by the ATO in liquidation, pay-as-you-go often can be, depending on situations. So it can be recovered, and certainly superannuation can be recovered, and there's certain other taxes that can be recovered now these days, which couldn't used to be. Although it's still very difficult for the ATO to do it, but they can recover pay-as-you-go in certain situations. So can we do much about it? So as I mentioned, if there's no mortgage, the ATO will rub their hands and they'll definitely tell the liquidator, have a crack at this. If there is a mortgage over the property, the ATO would tend not to pursue it, as do many other creditors. Jack may decide to put a second mortgage on. I know myself, when I got in a lot of trouble and almost went broke, I had a lot of people I owed money to. It took me a long time to sort it out. But as soon as these people saw how well I was structured, they magically became quite good to deal with. So it works really, really well to do this. So yeah, a lot of questions I'm going to look at. Yeah, I'll wait this till the end because they're kind of not on the topic at the moment, but they are important questions. So I'll definitely answer them. Greg and Molly owns 3 properties in one family trust, 2 in another trust. Family home and joint names worth $900,000, and they owe $200K with Bank West. Investment property in joint names worth $500 with $450K debt on it. Okay. So assume that they also run a product business where they're selling high-risk chemicals and things like that. They are structured in a company or family trust, not a partnership or sole trader. So how does this work in the real world? Like, how well protected are they? 3 properties in one trust, it's okay. Some asset protection people say they really should have 1 property per trust. I don't agree. If you've got a $10 million property, you probably should only have it in 1 trust. If you've got 3 small investment properties, you may just keep them in the same trust. 2 properties on a trust, I'm okay with that as well. If someone's suing them, they won't get it too easily. Family, home, and joint names, not okay. Huge equity, sitting duck. Investment property and joint names where 500K with 450 debt. Okay for now, because in the real world, as soon as the ATO found out that they basically, the banks can get everything anyway, they'll just disclaim their interest and they won't bother. So Greg and Molly's real risk is at 700K equity. So we just use that strategy I showed you on that whiteboard before to protect the property. So, and we would just transfer and move cash around. So the family home is now protected and really looking really in good shape. So like I said, this was an introduction to it today. Now I'm going to start hitting the questions that you've given me. So Annette, apart from being sued, is there any other way they can take property? The main way, Annette, is that governments can do certain road things through it, like confiscate it is one way. Suing is very common. Governments can basically go after you and for a tax debt or something that you owe, or like one of my friends, they fine you for some stupid thing and then go after you to recover it. And it's a very scary process, I can tell you, because I went through it myself. And clients who do, it's one thing to be theoretical, but just put yourself in a situation. I will answer your question in more detail. This is kind of a lead up to it. But let's just say that you suddenly found out that the government is claiming you owe them $500,000 tax, and you get those scary letters in the mail. And then you have the lawyer ask you about your property and start talking about, are you willing to sell it or get a line of credit? And you realize your house is at risk or whatever else. I'm sure everyone here would be losing a lot of sleep. So if you knew you're at real risk of losing your property or your home, just type a Y in this chat if you know that that would stress the fuck out of you if you had the ATO or someone and you knew that your property was really exposed. Like, who's honest enough to admit it would absolutely like stress the fuck out of them? Yeah, many of you would. I mean, and understandably so. And you would be like, because property can be a real security for people. So yeah, it wouldn't be fun one little bit. So having the reason that I have car insurance is not because I'm expecting to go and crash my car in a demolition derby next week. I've got car insurance because I don't actually, Sharon lost it devastating. Yeah, I lost a property years ago. It was horrible. I was so stressed about it. Years and years ago, I lost one in a situation. So yeah, it's awful. And Helen's been through it's horrible. So yeah, it's a very, very bad experience. All I know is that if I crash my car and I've got insurance, I'm very glad that I do. And same with health insurance when you go through a really major health thing. So this is one of these things that you really hope that it ends up being money, but nothing happens from it. Like most insurance policies, you just spend money and nothing happens, and the insurance company keeps all the money and they end up as a profit. That's how insurance by and large works. Your best case scenario is you'll spend your money on this and you actually, nothing will ever happen to you. And all it gave you was peace of mind. But it'll be the greatest thing you've ever had if that happens to you. So in terms of being sued, yeah, governments can come after you. They can threaten you on it. They can do all that kind of stuff. The other way is governments can nationalize properties and just basically compulsory just take them from people. That may or may not, the second mortgage may or may not help there, depends on the situation. If they force a sale of the property, like through a confiscation, yeah, it would help because the mortgagee gets first priority. If they nationalize properties, nothing that anyone can do could probably help, but that would be a very extreme, crazy scenario. What are the tax implications for family home with second mortgage and trust? Well, there's not really any the way we do it. Not really any. It's just simply a case of having security over it. There's no tax implications at all. Jarek, how is the valuation determined? Well, yeah, that's something that the clients would have an idea. Like generally I ask a client, how much is your property worth? They got a pretty good idea. And then we create the mortgage based on how much they think it's worth. If they really want to be thorough, they can always go and get a formal valuation. But generally, clients have a pretty good idea what their properties are worth. And all valuers do anyways. They just go and look at the recent houses and what they sell for. So generally, I find property investors, for example, and generally the most savvy people with their own assets, like I find that they can be very good clients and very annoying at the same time for that reason. They're very savvy. They know what they're doing. So they know how to do all this kind of stuff. So I say that a little bit cheekily, but you get what I'm saying. Can a second mortgage, provide protection in the family law court? Family law court's a whole different beast. That's like the one place that's very hard to protect from. They pretty much got laws saying they can look through trust, they can look through just about anything. If they get a sniff at a second mortgage as your own company, they'll just undo the whole thing and ignore it. So my experience with the family law is that you've got to start looking at some fairly advanced strategies to even get close to dealing with them. And there are strategies, but yeah, it gets fairly advanced. And what happens if only the spouse owns the family home and not the high risk one? Is the home safe? It's safer. It's safer. And so in other words, if let's say you got Jack who runs a risky chemical business and Jill doesn't, and she's at home with the kids, or the other way around, then obviously if the property's in Jill's name, it's much safer. So some accountants just tell the low risk spouse to own the property in their own name, and that is actually a good idea to do that. That can work really effectively for family home and others. It makes it a lot safer. Still, a second mortgage having some kind works really, really well, because in an extreme scenario where they try and argue through tracing laws that, Jill or that the low risk person, is going to be liable, and they can do that under bankruptcy law, even though it's hard. So it's just like another level, but it definitely makes a difference if the spouse owns the property. Rob, is it then safer to keep a small amount owned to the lender rather than completely paying off, enabling second mortgaging? No, not at all, Rob, because it just means it's a first mortgage that you're doing. So let's just say that you owned $1 million property outright. All you would do is just do a first mortgage from your trust over the property. So it doesn't really make any difference or not whether you do that for the protection strategy to work. Max, what if the property is fully paid off? No first mortgage, no cash. In that situation, and you got no cash of any kind, then if you've got cash which you can move around, it's always better. If you don't, it's still better to do it than not have one at all, because as soon as someone sees that mortgage, although a lawyer would tell you there's no point, 99% in the real world, when I was a lawyer, as soon as that anyone sees you've got a mortgage on it, they just don't bother. So it's kind of like the best, like, piss off kind of strategy you can do. So all I will tell you, Max, is that a liquidator, who actually pursues people for a living, told me privately, as a friend of mine, he goes, just put one on there, even if it's got no basis, just plonk it on there. He said, trust me, you walk in with that on it, my clients just don't really want to look at it anymore, because most people don't have one on it. Most people don't do it. So they just can't be bothered. They don't want to spend money because it costs a fortune to go to court and undo a mortgage. It's a very expensive legal exercise. So ideally you got cash, but if you don't, you just still do it. You just plonk it on and get a bit of help professionally to do it in a way that looks semi-respectable. Like you get some kind of documents together, you do an equity transfer and a gift. So what you would do is effectively what's called a gift of equity. So you would gift the equity into a trust for estate planning and wealth planning purposes, something like that. Again, I emphasize this is bordering on legal stuff now. So that's the general educational concept, but you've obviously got to get very professional advice for situation, because, for example, certain states, gifting equity can trigger stamp duty. In certain states, there's an argument, only in a couple of them. There's an argument, but it can do. So generally you've got a lawyer can help make sure that the gift is triggered in a different state than a stamp dutiable state. So as an example, Isla asks, do second mortgages incur same setup costs as a first mortgage? Well, yeah, I mean, depends what you're talking about. Like the bank, like it's exactly the same. Yeah, you just got to pay to set up the structure, to get the agreements in place. Like when we do them for clients, we get really good like thingy-jigs. What is it? We get when we set up for clients, we get really good lawyers and get top stuff done up. We plan it and do it all really, really well. So we do that in conjunction with WealthSafe and get lawyers from there, or not for lawyer. WealthSafe engages a lawyer and things like that. So, okay, so who really enjoyed this tonight? Like who's got, you know, some value out of this tonight and like really like, yeah, this is really cool. Awesome. No, great. So excellent, everyone. Yeah, Rob calls me Was now. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, we must be mates now. That's what my friends call me, Was. So, Nadine, you're the bomb. Oh, thank you, Nadine. You're very sweet. Loving the scary. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, everyone. So awesome. So now coming up, we've got this live event on the 23rd of October. Is there anyone here coming to this? And who's not? Because I strongly recommend you come, because it's going to be a whole day of wealth protection. We'll be covering second mortgages. We'll be covering, you know, offshore. We'll be covering advanced, like even advanced what's called shares. Let's say you bought shares in your own name and you're like, shit, what do I do with shares? You know, there's strategies using what's called PPSA floating charges to protect shares. So we'll be covering all that kind of stuff, like really advanced stuff on that one, about how to use gold and silver offshore and silver bullion. We've got Virgil coming from a top company who looks after high net worth in Europe to teach as to how, you know, this is used and how it's used, how you can even do crypto margin lending. We're going to do all kinds of stuff. That's going to be really cool. Sherelle asks, and Chris, am I going to sing? Yeah, I'll sing for you, Sherelle. So for those who can't get there for that day, there will be recordings and you can watch them afterwards. So for those who purchase the live stream, they can do that. So it's basically, there's a live event in Perth. So those who are in Perth, the Pan Pacific, we're actually doing it for actually people to turn up and all that. I think there's going to be about 30 people or something there live. There's lots more for live streaming and you get the recording. So if you can't be there for the full day, or if you know, have to watch it afterwards, you'll get the recordings and you can continue to watch the recordings month in, month out and hear my beautiful voice. If you're having insomnia, you can use it for that purpose too. So, yeah, Sherelle's keen. So I'll get my team to put, yep, some support as a package. So who's keen to come, who wasn't come before? Just write coming if you weren't going to come before, like coming, which means you are going to register or you're interested to get the link to register. Yeah, okay, a few people. Okay, so team, if you could just chuck the link in there, would be really good. Okay, here's the link, everyone. Hopefully you see it. So I'll just quickly show you the page so you can see it. The link is there. So all you have to do is just jump on over to, this is the link right here. So it's just here, you just wander down, you read it all, it goes on. It's got that, you click it there and then you click on it and then you can go and you can join. So whether you want live or online, and believe you me, like I said, this is getting like top value for next to nothing. And we deliberately kept it low cost just because this information is so important right now. And I want as many people as possible to be prepared for what's coming. So great, there's a few new people. Like I said, for those of you who can't be there on the day, look, and you still want the information, but register for the event before the event, because as those of you know, once the event finishes, we normally give a few more days and then we close it off. And the reason why is we're going to use a lot of these recordings to sell a future online product through the Global Wealth Club. That's just being honest. And we're going to sell it for that, along with all our other ones, at a much greater price bundle package with a whole thing. So the price you're getting at here, it'll last up until the event and for probably a few days afterwards as well. So, okay, everyone. Well, thanks very much. I hope you really enjoyed it. And I'll see you all. We're going to be doing another live stream next week as a final one just before the event, same time, same place. And thanks, everyone. And yeah, I was in a bit of a cheeky mood tonight if you didn't work out. So on that note, I'm off to watch. I've been recording all. I have to tell, just my little 3D pursuit. I literally record every Major League Baseball player. October, I just pretty much shut my life down apart from work. I record everything, every spare moment. I'm just watching all the playoffs. And I've watched 2 of the games, with the third one to watch from this morning. I keep myself away from the news so I can watch it. So after this, I'm going to get some dinner and I'm going to go watch the Dodgers versus the Giants. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful time. And I will see you all next time.
To kick the habit that my mind is breathing.